If you haven't, watch this video first because everything I'm about to say will make no sense. Okay, recap. One Punch Man had animators from every show and studio you could think of. Former Ghibli staff, top animators from Attack on Titan and Naruto. Like, it was crazy how much talent was gathered for this project. And a lot of them went on to do some pretty impressive stuff. Like this guy, Ryu Nakayama, who went on to direct Chainsaw Man and create his own studio, or Itsuki Tsuchigami, who storyboarded some of the top action scenes on hits like Jujutsu Kaisen. Of course, I'm barely scratching the surface, so again, highly recommend watching the first part to get context. But with that, let's follow on from where we left off with the Freelance Squad. And with someone who had a big influence in defining the art style of One Punch Man's anime adaptation, being the show's character designer, chief animation director, and key animator, yes, he did a lot, Chikashi Kubota, former Gainax animator, now freelancer. Now, despite Season 1's director, Shingo Natsume, being the main reason he ever came onto One Punch Man, Kubota would be one of the only major key staff members to stick with the series, continuing on to do character designs for the second and third season by JC staff, albeit not supervising the animation like in the first. Absolute tragedy. Now, in between One Punch Man, he wouldn't really stick anywhere for that long, coming in to do key animation on series like Detective Conan, Six Heart Princess, Fully Coolly Progressive. That is, until Dragon Ball Super Broly. Kubota had been a massive Dragon Ball fan since he was a tiny jit. It was the show that literally inspired him to become an animator, and the guy was just a fanatic about working on the series. Even his friend, One Punch Man's illustrator, Yusuke Murata, can attest to that. So apparently after the movie, he directly asked one of the producers to give him a position as character designer for any future Dragon Ball projects. Kinda bold. And that was granted, now being designer and chief animation director for the next film. He even did some 2D key animation which he was so passionate about being included, he made it a condition of his participation. For context, this was a 3D film. After, he would continue working on Dragon Ball's next upcoming series, Dragon Ball Daima, which is a project he's still currently involved in as of recording, as both a key animator and chief animation director. He has done some work on other Toei series like Dragon Quest Dai, and the recent Sailor Moon film last year in between it, as well as uncredited work on an opening for Oshi no Ko this year. But it seems Daima and the Dragon Ball franchise at large is where the majority of his attention will be for some time. There's also an interview last year that kinda confirms that, where he said if there was a Dragon Ball series, he would put every other project on the back burner to work on it. And then a few months later, it was revealed there was actually one in the works. So this wasn't really a hypothetical statement. So while it would be cool to see him more hands-on for the third season of OPM, either supervising or doing some key animation himself, I'm not holding my breath on that one. In the same interview, he mentioned he's also involved in an anime original film, so curious as to what that exactly is. And I guess while we're on the topic of Toei and Daima, may as well mention Toei animator Katsuyoshi Nakatsuru. Unfortunately, we still don't actually know what he animated on the first episode, but he's a pretty important name regardless. He started out at Toei in the early 80s and was one of the top animators on Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. And in time, he would have a heavy influence in defining the look of the anime, as he eventually would become character designer for the Buu arc and Dragon Ball GT. Nakatsuru would also fill the role of character designer for other Toei classics, like Digimon and Beat the Vandal Buster. He would also make a few appearances on Naruto and work regularly under legendary director Mamoru Hosoda on One Piece Movie 6, The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, and Summer Wars. His credits after OPM are pretty scarce, although the production he was most involved in was Black Clover throughout 2018 and early 2019. In regards to his most recent work, that's been as character designer for Dragon Ball Daima, as well as doing promo art for the show. It's pretty cool because Nakatsuru was one of the guys that actually inspired Chikashi Kubota to become an animator, so a cool full circle moment there. Mahiro Maeda animated the end of Season 1 with Saitama killing Pluton, he was another former Ghibli animator who started back in the early 80s on classics like Macross. And I mean, talk about a diverse resume, from doing animation on beautiful films like Porco Rosso and Castle in the Sky, to designing the angels from Evangelion, to then later doing concept art and designs for Mad Max Fury Road. even has credits for that animated sequence in Kill Bill Volume 1. As you can tell, he really didn't stick to one field, and that doesn't change post One Punch Man. Keeping in with the monster theme, his next credit was design work for Shin Godzilla, along with animation credits on niche shorts like A History of Studio Kara and Dragon Dentist, but that's really it. He kinda disappears for a few years, then returns for a new Evangelion movie, directing, storyboarding, creating concept art, and key animation. Including Eva though, he only has 3 key animation credits since One Punch Man, about the same as Nakatsuru, funny enough. Which makes the fact that he was even on this show at all really surprising. I mean, he rarely animated on TV anime in the first place. Heck, if you ignore Kill la Kill, you have to go back to 2005 to see him doing animation on a TV series, as his work for a lot of his career revolved around OVA and movie productions, and generally had been moving away from animation related jobs anyway, doing a lot of storyboarding and design work at this time. So with saying all that, it shouldn't be surprising that his most recent credit was design work for Kaiju number 8. Toshiyuki Sato. He's somewhat the polar opposite of Maeda with about 20 million credits across TV anime. He started out in the year 2000 and would be on hits like Attack on Titan, Hunter x Hunter 2011, Kill la Kill, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, so very experienced, and that shows. Among one of the top regulars, Sato created amazing animation episode after episode. He shares a lot of stylistic similarities with Yoshimichi Kamada, who I mentioned last time, expressive faces and poses, drawn with thick sketchy lines and snappy motion to actions, and of course both inspired by Yoshinori Kaneda. Now I'm not going to list all his work for the sake of time, but some of his best bits were Saitama taking out Lion King, Genos vs Carnage Kabuto, Genos whacking the Deep Sea King, Saitama defeating Hammerhead, and Metal Bat smacking that flying ghoul head thing. Now it's really hard to summarize his credits because there's such a ridiculous amount of shows he's worked on. Like, just this year alone, he has key animation credits across 15 different shows. When does this man sleep? So yeah, after the series, he was right onto Little Witch Academia, The Enchanted Parade, and other Studio Trigger stuff like Space Patrol Lulucore. Mob Psycho then came around, and like many of OPM staff, he was also there, animating some iconic moments. Then he comes back to Attack on Titan and JoJo, then FateApocrypha, Darling in the Franxx, then back for Mob Psycho's second season. At the same time, Shingo Natsume is inviting him onto his shows like Boogie Pop and Arca 13. Then in the 20s, he makes a guest appearance on Fire Force, Boruto, Black Clover, regular on Jujutsu Kaisen as well, and the movie then back for the second season last year, as well as Dragon Quest Dai, Spy Family, My Hero Academia, regular on Cyberpunk and Chainsaw Man, back for Mob's final season, regular on Bocchi the Rock, a brief return to One Piece, then a regular on Frieren. A lot of work on that series, Ninja Kamui, Undead Unluck, Delicious in Dungeon, it just doesn't stop. Any big name anime, you'll find him there. Anyways, his most recent work as of recording has been on The Elusive Samurai, My Hero, and the 7th anniversary PV for Azur Lane. Sejoon Kim, animator behind the very first scene in the series when Backseat Man is on his rampage. Although born in Korea, Kim would move to Japan in the early 2000s and immediately got into animating with his first key animation credit on a bread anime. There was other well-known titles he joined like Gintama and Code Geass, but he would gradually gain fame for his excellent mech animation. So it shouldn't be a surprise his next work after OPM was on Mobile Suit Gundam, then Doraemon, a bit of a swap up in genre, as well as Sword Art Online, Darling in the Franxx, Fate Grand Order, and Evangelion. Also made it onto that Dragon Dentist special that Maeda worked on. His most recent credit at time of recording is on Mobile Suit Gundam, The Witch of Mercury. Although if you want to see some of his non-mecha work, I recommend Ranking of Kings. Keiichiro Watanabe. Definitely one of the more idiosyncratic animators on One Punch Man, animating the Genos vs Armored Gorilla fight, Metal Knight taking on the Meteorite in episode 7, then the actual destruction of it after Saitama hits it, and possibly the section where he enters in initially. It's still yet to be confirmed. Watanabe would gain more and more fame in time. Like many of the animators I've mentioned, he too moved on to Mob Psycho, and from the first episode was showing off his stylish effects and detailed morphing monster animation. The guy just kept improving and would be one of the top action animators on Jujutsu Kaisen's first season, and definitely a contender in the second, and I'm sure some would argue in the industry at large. And as briefly touched on in part 1, Natsume would also invite him onto a few of his shows. Watanabe also would animate on Chainsaw Man, not too surprising, and you can find his latest work on Frieren. Tatsuya Yoshihara. He's kinda different. Now, he technically was another young, skilled webgen animator, like his friends I mentioned in the last one, Ryu Nakayama and Itsuki Tsuchigami, but in his case, he had already directed an anime when he was just 23. And well, had just finished directing another one before he worked on One Punch Man. So although he wasn't some old school animator that's been around since the debut of Prince, he still had some big achievements to his name despite having a pretty short time in the industry. Anyways, Yoshihara and directing anime wasn't a combo that went away, directing a bicycle anime of all things, but the most well-known title would be Black Clover in 2017. Unfortunately, the higher-ups at Studio Pierrot sort of abandoned Yoshihara, assuming that his wide array of connections with talented animators would be enough to keep things going. It didn't, creating a bit of a mess for him, but that wouldn't be the only big shonen title with chaotic schedules he would find himself on, jumping into Jujutsu Kaisen as well, animating some insanely good stuff there, after he would be brought on by his friend Nakayama as an action director for Chainsaw Man, putting out some pretty impressive cuts there as well. You can find some of his more recent animation on Frieren. Yes, he too made it there, but especially with Storia Wand and Sword, where he's not only directing but also being the series composer, which is a first for Yoshihara. I was also joking in the first part how I felt I would probably have to wait forever until the talented action director and animator, Tsuchigami, would storyboard some action again. Well, seems that wait was short, as Yoshihara would invite him pretty much right after I put that video out, working on the 9th episode. And I guess while we're talking about crazy good and influential directors that have a huge amount of connections, let's talk about Hakuyu Go. He animated the scene of Sonic decapitating all the bald dudes, and worked on the final episode with the Lord Boros fight. Unfortunately, it's unknown what specific part he actually did. And much like Nakayama and Tsuchigami, Go also ticked the checklist of a young talented webgen animator with little experience and who found their fame post-OPM. And he didn't have to wait long. Now, his first credits after Punch Man was on BBK and Dimension W, which didn't spawn anything that notable, but with the start of Studio Bones' next big title, My Hero Academia, and also the humble beginnings of the most hated fanbase, that was about to change. Even though the guy had no experience directing or storyboarding, he would be given both those roles for the All Might vs Nomu fight. And he did good. Exceptionally good, considering again this was his first time. After, he would pop in once on another Bones title, Mob Psycho, showing he truly was on another level than his days on One Punch Man. And a few other notable shows. But then came FateApocrypha, episode 22. This is one of those episodes which could be its own video, but let's just say he crafted one of the top action episodes of the year, and with many of those familiar One Punch Man names back. Toshiyuki Sato, Kai Ikarashi, Itsuki Tsuchigami, Takumi Sonokohara, and others I haven't talked about like Naoki Miyajima, Tatsuya Miki, Toshi Sada, and Toyo Oshima. And he would continue on that episode of the year streak with Mob Psycho's second season, episode 5. Once again, he would push the limits of what you would think is possible in a TV anime, with a lot of those action animators I just listed back, as well as others like Keiichiro Watanabe. Some mandatory military service in Taiwan though seemed to threaten his Sakuga streak, but soon after that short stint of swapping out a pencil for a T91, he was back, putting out the top stuff as always with the Fate franchise, and even a return for Mob Psycho's final season. Check out this video if you want to know more about that one. But then there was Jujutsu Kaisen's episode 17. The chaos, controversy, and amazing animation is another one of those it could be its own video topics. Although the terrible schedule definitely didn't allow for that polished of an episode, and entire cuts having to be reanimated for the Blu-ray edition, it certainly was just as ambitious and filled with many intense bits of action animation as his previous outings, even if it was far less refined thanks to Mappa's poor management, a topic he was more than vocal about on Twitter. His latest work post JJK has been some key animation for a commemorative special. Takehito Sakuzume and Shun Enokido. I'm going to make this a duo thing, as they both have a long history of working together on projects, to the point they became a production team called Mayu Tokage. Now, both were close friends with Tatsuya Yoshihara and Ryu Nakayama. Sakuzume in particular was invited into the industry directly by Yoshihara, and Enokido went to university with Nakayama. So they all kinda go way back. You can see Enokido and Sakuzume on Hunter x Hunter, Kill la Kill, and Ping Pong, and it was no different for One Punch Man, working alongside the aforementioned names. With the Mosquito Girl fight, it goes from Nakayama to Enokido, or in episode 10 when Saitama launches towards the ship, Sakuzume does the first part, then followed by Yoshihara. Enokido also does some key animation on the same ep when Tornado drops in. And yeah, it was pretty much the same after. They would be there for Natsume works like Arca 13 and Sunny Boy, working back to back on cuts. Also came on for Mob's second season, episode 5, and also joined Go for Jujutsu Kaisen episode 17. But what these two would be most well known for was the crazy work they did on the Fate franchise, mostly TV commercials and promotional videos, but also specials like last year where they both directed and storyboarded a special together, crafting some really amazing action. Their most recent credits as of this video are on The Elusive Samurai. Naoki Kobayashi started at Studio Kara, then joined Studio Pierrot, did some key animation on Attack on Titan, then soon became an absolute legend on Naruto Shippuden, animating iconic work like Madara against the Allied Shinobi forces, and Kakashi vs Obito, just all-time classic stuff. He would make a guest appearance on One Punch Man for its opening. After this job, Kobayashi would move to movie-related work for films like Your Name, Weathering with You, Suzume, also that Dragon Dentist special, and left Pierrot becoming a freelancer. He did drop back for one episode of Boruto with some amazing cuts, but he's pretty much completely moved away from action and TV animation at this point, with his latest credit on The Colors Within. Washio, aka Satoshi Nakano. At the time of One Punch Man, he was working at OLM, being a regular on the Pokemon franchise, as well as on others like Inazuma 11, the Tamagotchi anime, even Attack on Titan on a few occasions. Some great work there. Anyways, most likely brought on by Natsume, who he worked with on Space Dandy. He would be a regular animator on the series, animating scenes like Maroguri, aka Beefcake, going on his rampage, Bike Dude standing up to the Sea King, or attempting to. After the first season, he was back on Pokemon and would do the character designs for Pokemon Sun and Moon. That caused a bit of controversy, but animators seem to love them, even by old school legends like Yoichi Kotobe. He was one of Hayao Miyazaki's best friends. Like, this is literally the guy who gave us the Mario design we know today, and redesigning many other classic characters in that franchise. He also did a lot of work for the Zelda franchise, just an icon. So getting recognized by one of the greats was certainly a big moment, and one he fondly remembers. You can still find Washio on non-OLM titles like My Hero Academia, but that's kind of the exception to the norm. In 2023 though, he will leave OLM and become the director for a fairly newly founded studio, Bug Films, behind anime like Zom 100. His most recent credit as of recording has been on a My Hero Academia opening. Now finally for the Madhouse side, this should be short. There's a lot less stuff, but I'll still keep it to the main ones: Taiki Imamura, Hidehiko Sawada, and Yutaka Minowa. So first Minowa. Some of his best bits was Saitama killing Vaccine Man, and the cool walk-off Saitama does after defeating Lord Boros. He's a well-respected Madhouse veteran, being the character designer for old-school classics like Ninja Scroll and Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, many other titles as well of course, but this isn't a Manoa video. Anyways, he would continue doing key animation on Arca 13, Boogie Pop, Sunny Boy, Frieren, He did make appearances on some big non-Madhouse titles like My Hero Academia, the Kenshin remake, Kaiju No. 8, and more recently the movie My Hero Academia, You Are Next. Sawada. Top scenes, a minute of the Genos vs Saitama fight, mosquito thing getting splattered, and gay dude with wings. Sawada would work on many of the Madhouse shows just mentioned. Boogie Pop especially was a change-up, allowing him to do character designs for the first time. He did drop out of the studio on some occasions, like for Decadence and Heavenly Delusion, where he was pretty involved, but yeah, that was a rarity. His latest animation can be found on Freeren, and this show with an overly long name. And lastly, Imamura. Behind the classic fight with the Crab Dude and Bubblegum Saitama, Imamura surprisingly wouldn't be involved in many of the Madhouse titles Sawada and Minoa would work on, with exception to Boogie Pop. Instead, animating on Overlord, a couple of Lupin movies, and some romance anime. Unsure what he's currently working on, but going off his blog, he's been pretty busy. But with that final name wraps it up. I'll also give an honorable mention to the South Korean studio Dr. Movie. They poured a lot of staff into this show, as they do for Studio Madhouse productions in general, and although I can't point to any specific scenes they animated, as there's little known about their crew and they didn't really animate anything noteworthy, from a production standpoint they are definitely the unsung heroes, with credits across 11 episodes. But with that final note, thank you to my patrons and thank you for watching. I hope this series gave a good overview of where many of these amazing animators have been since One Punch Man, as well as a brief history of their careers. As I said in the part 1, there were over 100 key animators that worked on this show, so I obviously wasn't able to cover everyone, but it's still a pretty extensive list of the show's biggest and most important staff members. But with that, thanks again, and I'll see you later.